Welcome to Film Strip. These podcasts are spoiler-filled as we discuss the plots, characters, and themes of the films in review. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504(c)(2), Title 17.
Welcome to Film Strip. I'm Ron.
I'm Jay.
And I'm Jerry.
And this is our review of Gremlins, starring Zach Galligan, Phoebe Cates, Hoyt Axton, Polly Holliday, Francis Lee McCain, Judge Reinhold, Dick Miller, Key Luke, Corey Feldman, and the voice talents of Howie Mandel and Frank Welker as Gizmo and Stripe, respectively. Directed by Joe Dante and written by Christopher Columbus, no, not that one, the Home Alone guy. Released in 1984 on a budget of $11 million, it grossed a staggering $212.9 million at the box office. Gremlins was a smash, and an even bigger hit at the toy store, with Gizmo dolls being the hot toy of 1984 and kicking off a stream of video games, toys, collectible cards, storybooks, marketing, and most importantly, about a dozen Little Monster fake-out movies. Critters, Ghoulies, Trolls, Hobgoblins, Munchies, and all other kinds of dumb little creature features. But before we get into a plot summary of our Christmas spectacular, we have a guest, Jerry Davila from Totally Rad Christmas. Hi, Jerry.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your Totally Rad podcast and give us a little bit of your history with Gremlins?
Okay, well, I'll start with the podcast first. So I'm the host of Totally Rad Christmas. We've been around for about a year and a half-ish. Basically, we talk all things Christmas in the 80s, toys, movies, specials, music, fashion, fads, books. You know, I like to say if it was gnarly during Christmas in the 80s, we got it covered. I do kind of give a few years leeway there just to kind of, add a little extra depth because the 80s didn't happen overnight. So we kind of go from 77 to 93. But basically, I talk about the raddest time of year in the baddest decade ever. As to my experience with Gremlins, well, okay, so I was there. My parents took me when I was 4 years old to see Gremlins in the theater. It was a double feature. It was Ghostbusters and Gremlins together. And I remember I was ridiculously scared of the librarian in the beginning of Ghostbusters. And then I kind of fell asleep and I don't really remember it, but I remember Gizmo. Like I woke up and I was like super into Gremlins. And then I also was completely terrified when they turned into vicious creatures because I guess the marketing didn't really portray a whole lot of that part of it. And so my parents thought they were taking me to like a cute little gremlin, Gizmo kind of movie. And it didn't quite work out. But I love this movie. It's like one I try to watch now because I hadn't watched it in like probably 2 decades. And now I watch it like the last 7 years. I watch it at least once a year. It's great, But if I can watch it more than that, then I definitely will.
Now, I get the feeling, Jerry, your parents were not the only ones fooled by the marketing. But before we get into that, Jay, what's your history with Gremlins?
I, like Jerry, saw this in theaters with my whole family. Like it was, I've said on many podcasts before on here on Film Strip, holiday time was time for us to go to the theaters together. In 1984, we were there. I think I was 7 years old or so, and my brother was 12. And so, this was hitting the sweet spot. And we had seen Ghostbusters, and then we saw this, and I remember it distinctly. Funny thing about this, though, guys, I think I've only seen this movie all the way through, like front to back, maybe 4 times in my life, and that includes the time to watch it for this. I've seen bits and pieces of it through the years. My most distinct memory of Gremlins, and this is going to tell you that I definitely grew up in the 80s, were those read-along books you used to get that had the little 45 record that you could play along with, and it was sort of like plot summary, the story for you as a kid. I wore that thing out. Like I was obsessed with that. And I think I read through that, listened to it, whatever, way more times than I actually ever saw the movie. And I saw it a couple times as a kid, like I said, and then I would see bits and pieces on TV here and there, but never really went back to it. Revisited it several years ago because it was on that like, hey, I haven't seen that in a long time. Let's go back and revisit things from your childhood and see how much they're ruined for you. And I was like, I didn't really have any strong feelings about it either way. other than I was amazed that they actually found a white guy more boring and bland than Judge Reinhold, and they put him as the lead actor of this movie. And that is a feat in and of itself. And then, I hadn't thought about it again. And Ron, you and I were talking about like, we need to do some Christmas horror stuff. And I said, amazingly, we've never done either of the Gremlins films. And so, it was a good time to do that. And I knew we were looking for an excuse to have Jerry on too, because Totally Rad is a great podcast and a ton of fun. And so this was a good excuse. So my biggest memories of Gremlins, honestly, are that little read along record thing more than the movie.
So I actually still have mine. They're in my closet right now. I have all 5. It was like 5
awesome.
parts.
Yeah, you got them like Hardee's or something. Yeah.
Right. And I have all of them right now. I played them for my kids, like, I think maybe a year ago, and they just weren't interested. And I was like, man, this is just a different age. It was kind of sad.
They're probably like on YouTube or something if I really just wanted to go deep dive back into that.
Sure.
Now. I haven't looked for them, but I thought about that as I was watching this. I was like, I know what scene's coming next. And that's amazing for a movie that I've seen as few times as I've seen this one. And it's because of that dang book and record, man. I mean, it really summed it up.
So my history with Gremlins is those little read-along 45 things from Hardee's. I had all 5 of them. I don't even know when I saw this movie for the first time, but it was definitely well after I knew the story front to back because of those records. So those records and my cousin had a Gizmo toy. So those records and my cousin had a Gizmo toy, and both of those were like crucial things to developing my interest in Gremlins. And like Jay, I haven't watched this movie in a long time. I've watched it for a few years in a row now, but it's mostly just been here that I've started to actually pay attention to it. But before I start talking about a thing I noticed for the first time on this viewing, I better get to the plot summary.
Well, and before you get to that, you mentioned toy, and that reminded me, we actually had, I actually did have, I think it was about maybe 2.5, 3 inches tall. It was a plastic Gizmo, and it was pretty awesome. I mean, I remember I used to play it with He-Man and G.I. Joe, and it was like, he was just the cute little furry guy. And I think I pretended he was like a big Wookiee or something at one point.
I actually made him the Overlord King of the Ewoks as a kid, and because I just decided Gizmo was way cooler than the Fuzzy Bears in Return of the Jedi.
Not a Wicket fan?
No. People go back in the archives and hear my thoughts about that. But not my thought on that one. Yeah.
Now, does it make you feel better, Jay, to know that those Ewoks were probably eating those stormtroopers after they killed them?
I mean, I only expected that they were at the end of that. So, and it would totally go along with everything. But yeah, I think Gizmo could have got down on Endor. It was his kind of planet.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure, yeah. So I loved when G.I. Joe and Star Wars would like have intergalactic battles because G.I. Joe was really outmatched, except for Scarlet because she could kill everybody. Just don't trust the redheads.
There's something about a redhead, I'm telling you.
For me, the one who was killing all the Star Wars guys was Snake Eyes, because if anybody was one with the Force in a way that only Darth Vader could match up with, so we've had lightsaber versus nunchuck duels.
Yeah.
Light nunchucks.
I mean, I think we've just relived our whole childhood here.
I think we did.
The first 5 minutes of this podcast. But yeah.
Well, this has been a 5-minute taste of every time I've been on Totally Rad Christmas, or every time I've listened to Totally Rad Christmas, because it's always been like a blast in the 1980 right in the face.
Yep.
But like we talked about, Jay, in our Friday the 13th reviews, it was the 70s well until like 1987.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, it took a while for the 80s to actually latch hold of everything. And that's okay, because when it did, man, it was amazing. It was so amazing. John Mayer had made a whole album out of it this last summer. And if you haven't checked out Sob Rock, what are you doing with your life, people?
Well, before we get sidetracked any more about reminiscing about the 80s, I'll do the plot summary. Randall Peltzer, with a delicious buttery voiceover, is exploring Chinatown looking for a place to offload his malfunctioning crap, and he's dragged into Mr. Wing's Chinatown shop. After some back and forth, Peltzer uncovers a mysterious creature known as a Mogwai. And because he's one of the most American people who has ever lived, he buys it for $200 and takes it home as a Christmas present for his son Billy. However, Mogwai are a little harder to take care of than dogs, so Rand lists off Schrodinger's rules for Billy: don't get them wet, don't expose them to bright light, because it'll kill them, and don't feed them after midnight. Billy, more or less, follows those rules well until Billy's underage friend Pete accidentally spills a cup of water, splattering Gizmo with droplets and causing him to butt off 5 new Mogwai who aren't as friendly or as cute as Gizmo. Those so-called Peltzer pets are loud, troublesome, and obnoxious, and they make life a living hell for poor Gizmo and are second only to Mrs. Deagle as to their ability to torture Barney the dog. Billy takes care of his new charges, except for when he leaves with the science teacher, Mr. Hanson, until the evil Spike unplugs his clock, and Billy unknowingly feeds them after midnight. As we all know, after midnight is where it all hangs out, and after midnight is when all the weirdos turn crazy. And after midnight snacking is when Mogwai turn into evil, scaly, green-blooded gremlins. Mr. Hanson finds himself killed, the first person of many the gremlins inevitably murder, and Billy and his mother Lynn manage to fight off and kill the other gremlins in Billy's house, save one. Spike Scarper is paying a visit to the YMCA and doing a cannonball into the pool to create his very own gremlin army. Said gremlin army immediately start killing and maiming, catapulting Mrs. Deagle out of her upstairs window, throwing stuff out the mailbox, and driving Dick Miller's snowplow into his house. Because I know the character has a name, but he's always Dick Miller to me. Billy's pleas to the police are laughed off because Little Green Monster's wrecking stuff sounds like one of Mr. Futterman's drunken ramblings after one too many long necks at Duffy's. Billy rescues Kate from the aforementioned Duffy's, which is now renamed Gremlins, and they hide in the bank as the movie stops dead long enough for Kate to tell the world that there is no Santa Claus, shattering children's Christmas dreams worldwide. As dawn approaches, the Gremlins hole up in the local movie theater to watch Snow White, giving Billy a great chance to blow up the old movie house with all the Gremlins inside. Well, except one. Spike, because he's the luckiest gremlin who's ever lived, was across the street stealing candy from the Montgomery Ward. Billy, Kate, and Gizmo go to try and stop Spike, setting off a pretty good game of cat and mouse in the department store, with Spike flinging saw blades and firing off the jugs machine at Billy before a climactic showdown in the home goods department. Billy is held at gunpoint by Spike, who puts his hand in the fountain to kick off a new wave of gremlins, except Gizmo rockets into the scene on a toy car, flies through the air, crashes into the wall, and throws open the blinds to expose the mid-molting Spike to the killing rays of dawn, dissolving him into a Nazi looking at the Holy Grail puddle and putting an end to the gremlin threat. In the aftermath, as news reports mass hysteria in Kingston Falls, Mr. Wing shows up, gives Rand his money back, and takes back the Mogwai, stating that one day Billy might be able to take care of it. But for now, the West isn't ready for that responsibility. Gizmo offers up a sweetly sad, "Bye, Billy," as we fade out and credits roll.
So I got one question before we go any further. You think Arnold Schwarzenegger saw this in a theater and a year later was like, I'm going to do what the Spike did with the chainsaw thing. I'm just going to throw it through a guy's head because I saw the little man do it and I'm a much bigger man. I can do that now in Commando.
I don't know, but you're right. Stripe melting totally did remind me of his face melting in the
yes.
looking at the Ark of the Covenant.
Totally Raider. There's so much in this movie that is
just a complete
something else, and it gets ripped off and is ripped off from something else. And yeah, there's a lot to talk about for sure.
All right. So one of the first things I've noticed, and this is the first time I've ever noticed this, is just how much Gremlins takes its first act structure, the first 2/3 of the movie actually, from It's a Wonderful Life. And how many shots Joe Dante straight up steals from that movie. You get a lot of shots of Billy at the bank. You get the town's having money troubles. Mr. Potter, Mrs. Deagle is the greedy owner of the bank and half the town. You get all these great shots of Billy and Kate running through the snowy streets. The movie grinds to halt for a romantic subplot. And everyone learns just how great life was in old Kingston Falls, except there's no Clarence to set things right. They just have to live with the fact that their town was blown to shit by Billy and otherwise mutilated by gremlins.
Yeah, there's so much, it's like Chris Columbus had all these ideas in his head, like, I want to do It's a Wonderful Life, but with fucking monsters, and the Wicked Witch of the West is going to be there, and then there's going to be the hot chick from Fast Times at Ridgemont High, but she's going to wear a sweater and tell a really morbid story that's like Silent Night, Deadly Night 4 or something, and, it's all this crazy stuff in a Peltzer blender. And sometimes it comes out about like the orange juice does out of the peeler juicer that sprays the kitchen with goo as it goes.
It's funny because I didn't really notice that until you brought it up. But you're right. It's like exactly It's a Wonderful Life. You know, you have the protagonist who's just like just a white bread kind of guy. You know, you have the love interest kind of ish. You know, I mean, it's straight up It's a Wonderful Life. And now forever, I'm gonna call like Mr. Potter Mr. Deagle or something whenever I watch it. Because I think I like this movie better, which is crazy.
It's so well. I'll go on record with you that Jeremy said right now. It's a Wonderful Life is so incredibly overrated. That's a Christmas movie. Like it's been shoved down everybody's throats. To borrow Peter Griffin, it insists upon itself, and I that movie is boring. Like I revisited it with family a few years back, thinking, okay, this will be a fun thing to do. And 2.5 hours later, we were like, God, it's ever going to end? Because it goes on and on and on. And at least this movie knows to cut itself into some bit of a palatable chunk, as it does indeed. I think you described it right, Ron. Grind to a halt as we try to shoehorn a love story in there where, oh boy, there was not room for one.
Well, listen, Gary, why don't you go to the pool and take your top off for Judge Reinhold? That's a terrible Jimmy Stewart. My God.
That's a terrible Jimmy Stewart. But you know what?
That's not a bad idea.
I liked Kate a lot better when she was just a loose girl that worked at the mall, because she is horrible in this. Like, you got to say it. Like, Phoebe Cates is, her bad acting is only matched by how bland Zach Galligan is. And it's a good thing they have furry little monsters running around them, because otherwise, oh boy, this would be rough city right here. Like, I'm talking like Leprechaun 2 bad acting.
See, on the other hand, it's Phoebe Cates. And I think we all had a crush on her at this point, like every single one of us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not watching her for thespian feats necessarily, but the fact that they give her so much melodrama to do, only to be topped by the fact that in the sequel they just send it up, like to make fun of it. So at least they knew that, like, yeah, that didn't really land the way we thought it was going to.
With the Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and they just cut it off in the middle of it. So yeah, I don't know. There's so much you could talk about that. And the stories are famous, right? About like Dante fought to have that in there. And Spielberg was like, I don't even think it's that good, Joe, but okay. If that's, cause he felt like it was his, Indianapolis moment in Jaws or something.
Yeah.
Like, nah, we're missing a lot to be able to set that up and make that work.
Well, didn't he think it was like the thesis of like the whole movie, like
right.
We need this, because if you have this, then you know what the movie's about,
The thesis of the movie is Christmas sucks and might kill you then, because that is the thesis that Kate lays out. And that's pretty much what happens in this movie too, is capitalism will murder you, children. Merry Christmas.
All right, so we were going to talk about that later, but since we're already complaining about that story now, here's my question. Phoebe Cates, Kate, goes into this story, and I feel like this in and of itself, this story would in and of itself would be enough to, if it had been around, give this movie a PG-13 rating. Because this is both, like, funny. I think she does as good a job as anyone could possibly do with this thing, because it's clunky as all get out. Like, it's chitty chitty bang bang of monologues, because it's just falling apart.
No, it's the Karate Kid 3 macaroni and cheese monologue.
Oh, no.
It's that bad. Okay.
All right, so
no, he said it.
How is anyone skinny enough to actually fit down a chimney, or do they just have like huge chimneys in cold weather climates?
See, I'm from South Texas, so while there are chimneys, nobody uses them ever. I mean, it's usually Christmas time. It's like 70 or 80 degrees. So, I mean, I have no idea, but I guess they do. Why not?
Yeah, I've always wondered that too. And I remember as a kid, we had a fireplace in the chimney, and my dad got the stuff to like clean it out once. And we thought like literally he was going to climb down it, and it's just a big pole. He's like, no, are you stupid? Like, there's no way you do that, And so I don't know. Like, the thing about it, and this is what sticks out about it, is if indeed this is supposed to be the thesis of the movie, it comes at like the worst time. Like, you need to drop that earlier in Act 2 so that we feel some build up. Like, maybe if they did that like right after the science teacher is poisoned to death, which we're going to talk about the fact that the 5th grade science teacher can be poisoned to death on Christmas Eve. But anyway, it might have worked a little bit better, but they save it for this pivotal moment to try to bring all this to it. And I'm like, I think Billy's already eaten out her hand anyway, man. Like, I don't think you needed to sell him on her anymore.
That's the whole reason why Zach Galligan got this job, because he came in to read with Phoebe Cates, and Spielberg saw it and was like, oh, this kid is already in love with her. This is exactly the geek we want in this movie. And they literally cast him because they needed like a nerdy kid who was completely puppy dog in love with Phoebe Cates. And I mean, who wouldn't be in 1984? But, you know, especially if you're Zach Galligan, and that's probably the closest you've been to a girl in years.
At least one that looked like that. Yeah.
For real. I mean, like, okay, so this whole speech, I love the speech. It's terrible. You're right. It's not very well written, but it's like just so ridiculous. I think it's like the most Joe Dante thing out of like the entire film. You know, it kind of captures his quirkiness, his black comedy predilections. I mean, just everything about it. But you're right. It doesn't fit where they put it. And it really did need to be a lot earlier. I mean, I would have even put it maybe in Act 1 somewhere, you know, kind of set it up as like she hates Christmas. Just something about it just always seemed off where they placed it. And I think it's because it's like action, you know, they're running, and then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, so my dad this one time, I mean, it just doesn't quite work, I think. But at the same time, I really love the speech.
Give me another movie set at Christmas that's got a lot of action going on that stops to have a beat like this to tell you something really dark about a character. Friggin' Lethal Weapon does this perfectly. After Murtaugh's family's been taken, and when they're waiting on the phone call, and Riggs is sitting there telling him, like, we're going to get bloody on this one, Roger. And he's just doing his best Rambo. But you look at that guy and you're like, shit, this guy is seeing it. Like, this is going to be bad. And it turns out to be that way because you buy that because Riggs has set that up. Mm-hmm. And she's already told us early in the movie she hates Christmas, that it can be really depressing. Statistics show that. And I'm like, if anybody actually he's like that to you, like, don't ask him out on a date. Like, that is not a good time to do that, Billy. Like, but I think that's the whole point, is Billy is like Mr. Innocent Whiz Kid, because like his whole story is, and I got questions, so maybe y'all can figure it out for me. He works at the bank, but he still kind of lives at home in the loft, and his, I don't know, dad bringing in any income at all with all that crap. We have no idea, but that's a nice house. And Judge Reinhold says something about, like, you're supporting your whole family. I'm like, I know what bank tellers make. Like, what in the world? Like, is this guy doing? And he's a comic book artist on the side, drugs. And he's got drugs. He's got this young toady friend. Yeah, maybe that's it. It's drugs. It's got
and Corey Feldman is running drugs inside Christmas trees.
Okay, which Mel gets a bust next year. So yeah.
Oh, Jay, yes. All right,
tied it all together.
Okay, but before we get into the actual movie, you guys keep saying a lot of this stuff lost the feet of Joe Dante, but the original script that was written by Chris Home Alone Columbus, or not, he didn't do Home Alone, did he? He directed Home Alone.
Yeah, he did direct Home Alone, but that's a Hughes script. So.
Yeah, so Chris Columbus, one of the most milquetoast writers to ever have written, wrote the Gremlins script on spec, and it is incredibly dark. Like in the original script, Billy's mom gets killed. Barney gets killed. There's a scene at a McDonald's where the Gremlins are just like straight up eating people.
Yep.
Yeah. All of that kind of got cut out. But Spielberg bought this because he read the spec script and he was like, this is the weirdest thing I've ever read. I have to buy this. And he got Joe Dante out of kind of a career slump because Spielberg and Dante were both working on Twilight Zone, the movie. Yeah. So something good came out of that tragedy, and it was Gremlins.
Yeah. Well, that's the best chapter of that one, by the way. The one John Lithgow.
John Lithgow, yeah.
So, and it's funny. Spielberg, we talked about this off air a little bit about how we haven't done a werewolf movie. We need to. Dante did The Howling. And Spielberg loves The Howling. So he was like, Joe Dante is legit the dude I want to do this movie, because if anybody can get this balance of horror and funniness together, it would be this guy. And
you got to remember where Spielberg was in life at that point too. Like, his first marriage is falling apart. He's not really sure what to do, but he's starting to get himself together because he's met Kate Capshaw at that point. This is a year or so before Temple of Doom, and It's before he does E.T. and he starts feeling like kids are a decent thing to have. And so he's at that part of his life where like everything sucks. And so he's Limp Bizkit. He's going to break some stuff. And he reads, and I've read part of that spec script before, and yes, it is messed up. And in the hands of like, I don't know, maybe Trauma Pictures or New World, like it could have been some glorious B-horror action stuff. But Spielberg gets it, and he puts that famous schmaltz over it. And I love him, you know, and I'll defend the schmaltz till the end. People can hear Ready Player One, and I mostly defended it in that. And I think it actually makes it better in some ways, because having read enough of that dark one, like that seems cool until you realize like shooting that, who the hell is going to watch that? Like nobody's going to go back and see that, especially to the tune of $200 million, no matter whose name's on it.
Yeah, I don't think you're selling like a million Gizmo toys if the Gremlins are straight up murdering people left and right. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. The Gremlins have a death toll in the hundreds in this town. The consequences will never be the same for this place.
On the other hand, looking on the bright side, the budget probably got balanced. I'm just saying.
And everybody got to keep their houses because Mrs. Deagle gets offed.
That's right.
Right? Because where's her stuff going to? Back to the bank. So, yeah.
Which they throw in a line that I just noticed for the first time. Her husband, who you see his picture in the stairwell, he was a convicted stock swindler. She got her money. She's benefiting from ill-gotten gains. Also, all of her cats are named after various currency denominations.
Well, I mean, I didn't pick up on that. That's a good point. You know, so she was Gordon Gekko's wife, is what you're saying, and before we knew what that was. No, that I think if there's anything that works about this movie, it is the fact that all these caricatures pop up. These are not characters. These are cartoons come to life, and only, you know, accented by the fact that like Chuck Jones cartoons and cameos of Chuck Jones are in the background of this thing, because it does remind me very much of the Looney Tunes that I grew up loving.
It does quickly devolve. Yeah, it quickly devolves into Looney Tunes. I mean, it's just straight up slapstick style comedy. But I think that's why it works, because if you think about it, these creatures are kind of terrifying. You know, these little things that'll just mess up all your electronics and you know, try to kill you with bows and arrows and you know, all sorts of things. I mean, it's like that dichotomy of like, you know, the evil, but also it's fun. And I think that's why it works. And I think you're right. I think Joe Dante was probably the only one that could really have pulled off that kind of thing in this time. And so I am glad Spielberg tapped him to do it. And I am glad that he kind of punched up that script, because, I mean, as much as I would have liked to have seen Gremlins eating some people in McDonald's, I don't know if I would ever want to take my kids to McDonald's after that.
Yeah, moreover, you notice McDonald's is not the product placement in this. It's friggin' Burger King, which is next to like a pet store. So that's saying its own thing anyway. But yeah, they clearly were smart about this. But yeah, you can feel the parts where like, that's Spielberg injected into the script, like where he's rewritten it 14 times for somebody to say it better and, you know, give it a little life and stuff. The one thing I like, you know, and you notice it if you watch enough movies, I mean, it's the friggin' set that they use for Hill Valley. So it's Hill Valley with snow. So, you know, the movie theater, all that stuff. And it's kind of fun to, you know, see those things if you've watched Back to the Future a lot. And I've seen that way more than I've seen Gremlins. So I noticed all those little things and got a kick out of it this time. And then Ron, you're right. All the It's Wonderful Life stuff, they blanket on top of it, like all the potato flakes that are the snow here, just to layer it on a little thick. Like they want us to be in a mindset. 'Cause we open up with the jamming Christmas song, and it's everybody getting in a good mood. And here's Corey Feldman as a tree, and you know all this cute stuff going on, and this mean woman wants to hurt this poor little banker's dog, and all this stuff. You have all the goofy people in the front of this movie. There's that one guy that gets scared by Mrs. Deagle on the sidewalk, and I swear, like Harold Ramis ripped that off for Groundhog Day years later with Stephen Tobolowsky coming around and doing, like, it feels like the same kind of scene. So you have all this stuff to just sort of get you in the mode and the mood, and you're there, and there's the cute girl and all this stuff. And then we forget, though, how the movie opens, which is Hoyt Axton, of all people, the most folksy voice, hee-haw thing going on, walking through the streets of Chinatown, just trying to like hawk his wares or buy something weird at whatever this guy's store is. I mean, that is such a weird opening to this. It adds a layer of the Chinese mystical that, I don't know that most people remember the movie. I think most people remember that big blast opening on the snow, but it opens in Chinatown.
Now, it's funny because Hoyt Axton was the only person they had in mind for Rand Pelzer. They wanted Hoyt Axton from the very beginning. And when they had to cut a bunch of the opening, Joe Dante went to Hoyt and was like, you sound super American. Here, just read this voiceover. You got a great voice. Just read this crap. And that's why we get the bookends with Hoyt Axton reading the intros and the outros, because they had to cut a bunch of crap out of the middle of the movie that explained all this. But from the very beginning, if you have any knowledge of Chinese, and I did not until I looked this up, Mogwai is Cantonese for devil.
Yeah, devil or demon, evil spirit kind of a
thing.
Yeah,
so Key Luke is trying to warn you right at the front of this movie. And also, can we all appreciate the fact that Key Luke got hopefully a good payday to put on a Fu Manchu beard?
Yeah, I
love that guy.
Yeah, I hope he did. Can we also talk about like the prototypical short round here? It's the one who sells the Mogwai to Hoyt Axton.
You think Spielberg saw it and was like, I got an idea for a movie.
I'm like, I know what to do.
I know exactly where to put this kid.
The next indie movie, we got to get him one of these. That's what happens too.
And the problem was they couldn't afford the Mogwai, so they just got an Asian child.
Right.
Yeah, they brought the Mogwai out, and Harrison Ford was like, I'm not acting next to that fucking thing. Get it out of my fucking face.
That was too much emotion, man. Dial it back a bit.
Well, he's angry.
No, I've seen him do emotion when Chris Angel did like some of his weird devil magic in front of me. He's like, "Get the hell out of my house!" Like, no way.
That's one of the funniest clips I've ever seen. I should probably cut all this crap where I'm just dropping F-bombs, but whatever.
Who cares?
It's going to have the explicit tag.
It's an 80s movie. What are you going to do?
Yeah, it's still PG. We're only showing faces melting off and people getting murdered by monsters.
Yeah,
we used to roll back then.
If you ever needed to know the clout Spielberg has, the first, the fact that there's no new Jaws movies ever, as long as he's alive. But if you just wanted to know how long that has been going on, nearly 40 years, people. He went to the MPAA and told them where they could stick that 13 at the end of that rating, because he was like, no, I'm dragging the American family to this horror fest where we're going to talk about Santa dying in a chimney, and we're going to, murder half the town we're going to have one of these lizards flash somebody, even though he's got nothing in front to flash. And, that we're going to do all of it, and it's going to be friggin' PG. And they said, yes, Stephen, sure.
The PG-13 wasn't introduced until 2 months after this came out.
I did not know this. I thought it had been around.
So my thought is Spielberg said, you're not rolling out a new rating. No, you're going to hold that crap until Gremlins is through. You can give that crap to Red Dawn or something.
Yes, they slapped it on Red Dawn, how Red Dawn is only PG-13 is a conversation for another day. But yeah.
It's a whole nother time, man.
Right?
You can get away with so much back then.
I mean, it's amazing to think about, though, right? I would argue too, it was a better time before the MPAA got a stick up its nose about everything and started, wrecking movies, by cutting them to pieces for what they were. I'm for one of those that, like, art is art. You make a choice, in this country in particular, to go view it. And what's funny though is that this movie is built on the dupe of like, come see the cute little furry thing, and there might be some green monsters, but they're cute too. And then you get in there and it's like, my father died and tragic accident, and and then you've got the neighbor like going, you can't trust all this foreign crap, and then people just getting their faces torn off and shit. Man, this movie is messed up.
I just wonder how many racial slurs they had to cut out of Dick Miller's dialogue. Not that he would say it, but they were definitely written for that character. He's like saying all kinds of Asian slurs every time he's like talking to his television.
Yeah, he's like full Wesley Snipes in Demolition Man.
right? Like that'd be great. Like, you have violated the verbal morality statute for the Kingston Falls. No, that would be awesome to know, because what's funny about that, though, and I think that is the joke of the Futtermans, is that he's always saying that, but look at all the foreign crap he has in his house. Like that Kentucky Harvester may be American made, whatever. We were still importing parts back then too, bud. But anyway, but he's got a Sony TV and he's got, all this, because that was the joke of the 80s, right? The Japanese are going to take over, right?
Take over everything. Yep.
And isn't that what Takagi told us in Die Hard, another great Christmas movie, that, Pearl Harbor didn't work out? We got you with Take Decks.
He did say that. He did say that. Yep.
All right, so
I've seen Gremlins. So.
So we've talked about the Looney Tunes influences, and to me, those influences show up the most in the design of Gizmo, because everything they said about Bugs Bunny in the Warner Brothers cartoons was, he's got to have big ass, he's got to have kind of a pot belly, he's got to have little short little arms and legs, he's got to kind of be shaped like a baby. And Gizmo is just the ultimate cuddly baby to me. I mean, do you guys have any thoughts about the unbearable cuteness of Gizmo?
It starts, too, when they have that little fake synthesizer, which I had as a kid, and he's singing along with it. And it's just like, oh, it's just a little angel. And I'm like, that's the greatest trick the devil ever pulled. It wasn't convincing people it didn't exist, is that he was a cute, furry little thing you could own.
Well, and didn't they actually have to, like in order to emphasize its cuteness and to make sure that all the puppetry worked, didn't they actually have to make it a little bit oversized, like for close-ups and stuff? I think they actually had like one or a couple that were a little bit bigger, and then that way they could get all the facial expressions that they really wanted him to do. But as far as the cuteness goes, yeah, I mean, I wanted one so bad. That's the whole reason my parents took me to see it, because they're like, oh, look at this cute little thing. And now you look at like the Mandalorian and Grogu, the child is like, I mean, he's basically Gizmo, right? Just without the fur. I mean, it's like a design that kind of really stands out and stands the testament of time just because how cute it is. I mean, it's kind of anime with its big eyes, like you said. It's kind of just, Care Bears-ish and just teddy bears in general. I mean, everything about it just screams like, hug me, I'm cute. Yeah. And that's why when they turn into those fierce creatures the design's actually kind of cute on those too. Although it is also a little terrifying, but just everything about it screams like, this is the pet to own. It's your best friend. I mean, it's amazing. And I think that's why it sold so many toys, because he's so cute.
The thing about it that gets me is that there is nothing that it looks like entirely by itself. And there's nothing else that's ever looked like it since, that you don't automatically reference point that. So it's implanting a false memory that it's the only thing of its kind, that it's ever existed. So, and that is, I don't want to undersell how hard that would be as an artist to create something unbearably cute, but that doesn't really look like anything else we've ever seen. And that, I mean, the artistry to come up with that is pretty darn amazing. You got to admit, like that is some good work there.
Yeah, for real. Production design, whoever the designer was on that was fantastic, because he makes it, like you said, he makes it nostalgic enough because it still kind of resembles like an anthropomorphic, bear, like a teddy bear, but it's just odd enough that, there's something not quite right about it. And so you get that familiarity with it, but at the same time, it's something I don't think it could have been designed like in the 70s or in the 60s or anything. It's like quintessentially like 80s in its design, because then after that, you start seeing so many other creatures that based its design off of it that really, I mean, in the 80s, that it's just so 80s to me every time I see it. Like, it's something about it. It's like, I don't think it would have worked. I think the design would have been completely different if they had done this movie like 10 years earlier, and so something about it just, it screams like, 80s, commercialism.
Yeah, it really does. I think it's Rick Baker, right? He's the guy doing a lot of this stuff. So, and kind of early Baker stuff too. So it's really good.
Well, that would tie back into The Howling, because Rick Baker did The Howling. So that tracks. I don't see why he wouldn't want to pull off the exact opposite of the werewolf transformations and the howling by making something adorable, not horrifying. But
I do have a question about that. Just to jump in there,
Mhm.
when they spill water on it, though, that terrified me as a kid, and even to this day,
Yes.
like there's something about the bubbling on
Yes.
poor little Gizmo. I'm like, that is just eerie. And when they kind of unfurl and there's that sticky noise, you just know, like, oh, this is not going to go well. This is bad.
yeah, they do a great job of establishing immediately that these gremlins aren't like Gizmo. But before we get into that, or before we get much further into that, the 3 rules. Let's dig into that while we're talking about it, because this is when he's talking to, like, Billy's talking to Corey Feldman. He's like, here are all the rules for this thing, you know. Okay, so you can't feed them after midnight. At what point can you feed them? Can they have breakfast?
See,
it's a good question. Do they recognize time zones? You know,
that's what I have always understood. That is, it's relative to where you are and where they are, just like it would be for you and me. Because Billy has a line, and I noticed it distinctly this time. It's like when they're all jumping up and down in the box and having a freak out, and he's like, "Shut up! I already fed you." You know, and it's like, okay, so obviously you can feed them. I think the idea of after midnight is sort of like anytime when we would be asleep. You don't need to feed these things. Cage them up, keep them away. And even, you know, Mr. Wing or whatever has Gizmo in a cage, you know, kind of at all times. So he knows. And that's how I've always said. I know people pick on that a lot because it is kind of funny, but I mean, it's not like New Year's Evil where he's trying to hop planes or something. That's what I used to think that movie was, where the guy's jumping between time zones. I think it's just relative to wherever you are. So,
well, don't they even ask the question in Gremlins too? I think when he's trying to convince like the scientists or whoever, I think they even ask that question. You know, what if something gets stuck in his teeth and then he crosses a time zone and
right?
You know, does that count as eating after midnight? I mean, yeah. So Joe Dante, I think, doesn't even really pay attention to these rules, or Chris Columbus. You know, I don't think they even really cared about the rules themselves.
The light one is the one that I'm like most skeptical of, because I'm like, so I mean, like, because I watched a lot of Buffy and Angel, and they skirted around that a lot with the vampires. Like, they could run out in the sunlight as long as they had a coat over their head sometimes, and there might be a little smoke, but they'll be okay. And I'm like, how do you avoid direct light at all time? Like, that would be very difficult to do.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why Mr. Wing has his shop in a basement. But my question is, all right, so let's assume these creatures don't drink anything. But we see the Gremlins and Duffies get just splashed with beer constantly, and yet they don't start molting and bubbling. So does it have to be clean water? So, like, if you splash Gizmo with a mud puddle, would he sprout still? Or does the alcohol in the beer, like, counterbalance the water?
I don't, maybe the Schlitz, I don't know. Because, like, you know.
If it's Schlitz, wouldn't it be mostly water anyway?
Well, I mean, it's true. It's fair. It's paintbrushes, like, that are sort of, to keep them from drying out, they're just in a thing of water. But you got to imagine there's still some chemical residue in there. And, I mean, later, Stripe jumps in a chlorine pool, so I don't know that it's clean water. Yeah, that's another one of the rules that sort of you can tie yourself in a knot trying to figure out what's the logic of that. I think the way those are laid out, the part of it that's always got me is like the kid could have actually also said, if you get them wet, here's what happens. If you get them in sunlight, they'll melt. Like, you seen Raiders? I saw it too, and I'm going to be in the next one, and they're going to melt like that, or. If you feed them after midnight, they're going to turn into green monsters. Like, it's one thing to give somebody a rule, but you don't tell them what the consequence is. What the hell? Of course I'm going to do
it. Do these pedantic rule complaints I'm making even matter to this movie? Does it matter at all? Or is this just or am I just letting the plot get in the way of the story?
If you start pulling these threads, man, the sweater's coming undone. Like, real quick. Yeah.
No, it really doesn't matter at all because it's just so fun. You know, it's like just stupid, dumb fun that makes it worthwhile. I mean, and I guess it's one of those where, like, once you add something and it becomes something else and like its matter actually changes, I suppose. Is that when, like, it, so like muddy water is still kind of water, right? Just has a little bit of mud in there. But like when you add like the coffee or when you're brewing a beer, that's like actually different, right? It becomes something. I mean, I don't know, but who cares? Because I mean, at the end of the day, we're going to see some gremlins, chew a guy's arm off or something in the mailbox, and that's all we want to see.
Let me give you guys a comparison. The movie you're wanting, where you want the rules to matter and say anything, is the
Christopher Nolan movie.
Yeah, well, no, it's The Thing. It's John Carpenter's The Thing. That's where that makes it. And then you have the fun one, which is this movie. Much like if you want like the slasher that thinks, you want Halloween 1978. Or if you just want to watch people get chopped up, you want Friday the 13th Part 2. I mean, there's a difference. And I think these movies live in that time zone. The Thing and Halloween are kind of more in the serious, take themselves seriously kind of mode. Whereas Gremlins and Friday the 13th 2 through 7 don't really take anything seriously. That's kind of the point of it.
That's fair enough. I think the more I start focusing on these rules, the more I turn into a real Judge Reinhold character.
Well, you're talking about the yuppie from hell.
You
right?
gotta have one of it. It's an 80s movie, man. You gotta have a yuppie.
I mean, you see the proto, like, St. Elmo's Fire and all of those movies, like, in this dude right here. And what's so funny, 2 years before or a year and a half before, he's playing a high school kid working at a fish restaurant who's crushing on Phoebe Cates. And then they're doing this and, like, totally different, people again. It's always fun to see actors that do things sort of consecutively with each other, where they play a high school student and then they play like a, successful executive 2 days later. It's, it's funny.
Well, that's one of the reasons why Judge Reinhold is in this movie, because he was in Fast Times. They wanted people who already had chemistry with each other, so they're like, well, he can act around Phoebe Cates, so let's just have him in the movie.
Moreover, he can act around Phoebe Cates and not drool like Zach Galligan does, so he can actually get through a scene. Can we talk about Zach Galligan? I've picked on him a lot. Like, I mean, he is the dime store Jimmy
He's
Stewart.
the blandest guy.
Yes.
I mean, he's naive to like a fault. I mean, as a character, he's not a character. You're right. He's just a caricature. He's like so one dimensional, but at the same time, he's got like this charm to him. I think and that's kind of why you follow him as a protagonist. And I mean, I get what Spielberg was saying, because I completely bought his crush or his chemistry with Phoebe Cates. I mean, he was basically just fawning all over her, and I mean, I don't blame him, man. I'd probably be doing the same thing. I saw Fast Times.
I also think he was legitimately scared of Polly Holiday. For whatever reason, whatever she did to him on set, Flo brought it. Yeah, I mean, like you see the look on his face. That's real fear. Like whatever she did worked.
Well, that's one of the reasons Polly Holiday got this role, is because of Alice, and they were like, we want somebody that people know who's capable of just having an acid tongue, but we're going to take all of the comedy out of it, and that's where we get Mrs. Deagle, who is history's greatest monster. And the person in the movie who most deserves her wicked witch-like death.
She gets her comeuppance, yeah.
There's definitely parallels between her death and the death of the wicked witch, because the last shot of her is with her feet in the air, like a dead cartoon character, or like a dead cartoon animal.
Yeah, I got like a Wile E. Coyote thing out of that whole, like, the automatic stair lift thing, and it just flings her out the window and all that. I was like, I just waited for him to, when he goes off the cliff and he holds up the sign, like, help. And he drops, and only to be accented.
That would have been the best movie ever,
right? Only to be accented this time by the fact that, and I just noticed it, when she's going by that portrait of her husband, he's kind of side-eyeing it, like, yes, finally, she'll join me in hell.
It's 100% a Looney Tunes gag, and I'm surprised that we don't see the eyes move to follow her as she whizzes past.
Dude, it's a Ghost and Mr. Chicken
awesome.
Gag. That's what that's from.
It would have been awesome.
It's a Don Knotts gag. But that's the thing, though. This movie, even though it's so 80s, is friggin' obsessed with the 1950s and everything about the 50s. The cool culture, Clark Gable and the race cars and all that, and the noir detective and the sweet innocent town and all that stuff that we think is the 50s or whatever. This movie is obsessed with, this town is obsessed with the 50s. So it's neat to see a movie that is so 80s be absolutely obsessed with the 1950s. Only to be topped by what Back to the Future would do 3 years later.
Right. Well, and I think that's why this movie kind of still holds up compared to a lot of other 80s movies, is because it's that superposition that you're talking about of like the two different eras. And so it's kind of timeless, question mark. I don't, it's something about it. It makes it still worthwhile. And I don't know if it's just because it's zany, because it is ridiculously over the top and, or not. I don't know, but whatever it is, it really does hold up, and it kind of does have that just timeless feel.
Yeah, 2022's Gremlins 3 would be set in like an Amazon distribution center or something.
I hope so.
It wouldn't be nearly as interesting. It would be funny for the gag, but I don't know that it would work as well.
The whole point of Gremlins 2 was Joe Dante was like, I'm going to poison this well with so much poison, no one could possibly follow me up because I don't want anybody else to mess up my Gremlins.
Did y'all ever see that Key and Peele sketch?
Yes.
And they send in like, the Hollywood, like, a sequel maker or whatever it is.
Yes. Well, for years I thought Rob Zombie invented ruining your own franchise when he did Halloween 2, which I like that movie, but it's weird. And I wouldn't tell you it's a good Halloween movie. And he killed the franchise, for a decade. And he did it because he didn't want him to do a sequel. And when he found out they were going to, he said, fine, I'll do it. Yeah, cheaper. I don't care. And he just went and did it. He said, we're going to ruin it all. And he did. And, Joe Dante invented that for him. So, and Rob probably totally thought of like, I'm going to do the Gremlins 2 version of a Halloween movie. And it pretty much does. And that checks out. That's a good call.
Yep. It's funny because, as much as I love Gremlins, I think I actually love Gremlins 2 even more. Just because it's so over the top, it's so ridiculous. They just, they take it to the next level. I mean, we got an electric gremlin. There's a vegetable gremlin. The bat gremlin was like the coolest thing to me ever.
The TV station where everything has a dedicated channel, and you just think like, how ridiculous is that? And now that's exactly what the horror channel. You got the cooking channel.
So you're saying it's very prescient.
Yeah, I mean, it's so. I mean, but that's what's fun. Like I look at that movie almost like an extension of my mass comm theory class from junior year of college. Like it feels like that in a lot of ways. It's more a commentary on what's going on than anything else. But yes, it does murder the franchise. And it's more watchable on an academic level, I guess you would say. That sounds really stuck up. I don't know why I said it that way, but it's more of an exercise to watch that. Like you're not really gaining anything. Whereas this movie, if you just let it go and don't pick at it the way that I have and we kind of all have here a little bit, it is just kind of cute and it just flies. But we do have to talk about the fact that it does absolutely slow down. And it's not just the love story they try to cram into it. There's like a 25-minute segment of this where I was literally going like, come on with it. Just murder something, do something. Like this movie could have used just a little more trim. Like a 2-hour, this movie did not need to be nearly 2 hours long.
Well, that's the thing. They already trimmed a bunch out of it. So I don't know how much more I guess it couldn't be much more incoherent, but 100% you could cut every little bit of Corey Feldman out of this movie. I don't like Corey Feldman, but what's the point of Billy being friends with a literal actual child?
No, Billy could have made that same mistake and knocked the water on him. Like, and it would have worked. It actually would have made Billy a little more culpable for this because Pete never has to pay for that.
No, he just disappears from the movie. Like, we never hear from him again. I assume he's at home dealing with his own gremlin problem, but I mean, who knows? It's the craziest thing. Like, let's introduce his character. Oh, he's responsible for like all this stuff. Whatever.
I can only think that like his death was something that they got cut because Spielberg has always felt bad about the kid getting murdered on screen and has swore he would never do it again, and I feel like Pete would have bought it with like 100 of those or 10 of those things jumping into that Christmas tree costume and just tearing him to ribbons. Like
which would have been the Critters 2 guy in the Easter Bunny suit.
Yes. That would have been perfect. Exactly. Good callback.
I feel like there's a bunch of Corey Feldman that was on the cutting room floor because there was a bunch of Judge Reinhold and a bunch of Bank stuff and a bunch of Mrs. Deagle that ended up on the cutting room floor. There's this whole scene that was cut of Mrs. Deagle just excoriating Kate, just like destroying her.
Yeah, but I don't think we need it. Like, that's the thing, though. Like, I get why you would cut that because she's evil just from the first scene with that broken snowman helmet. And the way she spikes fear in the town just walking down the street. Like the 2 scenes when she comes in the bank. And again, I think Zach Galligan was legit afraid of that woman. You can see it on his face. And that's all we need. Like, we need more of that. I think what I could have done with less of and maybe I want an explanation of it, is I know the Gremlins run the town amok, right? And there's that whole bit where they're at Duffy's bar. And I want to know at what point Kate decided to start serving them drinks and then to continue to do so. I could have done without.
That never made any sense to me. Even as a kid, like I remember seeing this, like I said, I was 4 years old when I saw this. I didn't get why was she sticking around serving them drinks? That just made no sense to me.
I have a perfectly good explanation for that. Bunch of green, scaly monsters coming to your bar. Are you going to piss them off by not giving them beer? Or are you just going to liquor them up and hope they pass out so you can leave? Because there's no way. If she tries to run, they're just going to maul her to death, like presumably they did Corey Feldman. So your best chance is to stay behind the bar, pass out the beer, and hope one of them wants to be a smooth jazz noir guy in a fedora.
You're going for the Peter Venkman, what we should do with the Marshmallow Man. He's a sailor. He's in New York. We get this guy laid. We got the trouble. Yeah,
you know what? They didn't even try that. I mean,
yeah. Well, there were several of them coming on to her, bless her heart. No, I've always thought, but like, I think that it's the Gremlins causing mayhem in town. Like, we could have montaged that up a little bit more, and I think it would have made it just go a little more fleet. I'm talking about if you just trim 10 minutes of this, it may feel less like we're there. Let's get with it. I don't know. It just seems like we take a long time to get to the big showdown at the sporting goods store, mall, place, or whatever.
So that shift in tone between like the It's a Wonderful Life versus this movie becomes a legit horror movie after a certain point.
It's when they take the thing to the science teacher. That's when it becomes a horror movie.
Yes. The whole thing about Mr. Hansen where that thing is skulking around in the dark, that's scary. The whole thing where Lynn is like going around the Peltzer house and these monsters are jumping out at her, that's scary stuff. Like, even before they become full-on monsters, they're like tying up Barney, they're like beating up Gizmo, they're just little jerks. And does that tonal shift where this movie goes from being a comedy with bumbling Zach Galligan drooling on Phoebe Cates to a out and out horror movie, does that work for you guys?
I think it worked for me, mostly just because when it really does happen, his mom is just like a badass. I mean, she takes out like 4 or 5 of them all on her own. I think if she had died, I don't know if it would have worked for me in that case, which I would have made it more horror, but I don't know. I feel like that kind of eased into the transition a little bit because she was kind of triumphant. And so there was, it wasn't so jarring. Like, I think if it had been, her death, like originally written, I think it would have just been too jarring. And I don't know if I would have bought that tonal shift. But I think because she's still, I mean, and it's frightening. Don't get me wrong. It's still kind of, suspenseful, but I think because she's triumphant, there's just that little bit of hope that you get, and a little bit of levity, especially in the way she kills them, with the microwave and the Peltzer blender, juicer, whatever it's called. I mean, I think because of that, it works a little bit better. I do think that it could have probably been a little smoother for sure. I don't know how they would have done it, but I think they probably, a more seasoned writer perhaps could have, just transitioned that a little bit better because it was kind of abrupt.
See, my argument would be that it would have worked better had they had kept that tone going through it, where they kept kind of the Looney Tunes ridiculous kind of funny mixed with the horrific stuff. I think a movie that does that really well, like Fright Night does that really well. There's part of that movie that gets really friggin' dark and then it gets goofy and it's fun, it's like fun. So that when the attack in the house is happening and even the thing at Duffy's, like, this movie is being fun and horrific at the same time. I was okay with that. It's when it takes that hard left into Albuquerque and it's Breaking Bad and we're jumping in pools and it's going down. Like, then I'm like, well, we're in a different movie now. Like, this is, we have completely shifted gears and we can't go back to fun anymore. And that's when I feel like the second half of this movie on is really lacking a lot of the laugh and the fun that we got in the first half of it. It's really after the attack of the house everything starts going much darker, accentuated by the Phoebe Cates speech, which we've already talked about. Everything is so much darker toned, and it's like this movie starts taking itself seriously all of a sudden. I'm like, no, you were better when you were just being goofy and funny. You were being live action Looney Tunes. Do more of that.
It's funny that you mentioned the live action cartoon, because that we kind of get to the point where it's starting to get closer and closer to dawn, and you've got the town, while after Phoebe Cates tells her story, the town and the movie theater showing Gremlins the movie have all been rendered silent. The movie, because the Gremlins are all holed up in the local movie house, and your movie theater because Phoebe Cates just killed the crowd. But all the Gremlins are holed up watching Snow White in what is a pretty good piece of Disney cross promotion. Do you guys remember when Disney used to re-release all their movies in theaters when they would call it opening the Disney Vault?
Yeah.
Yes.
Did you guys ever go to any of that stuff as a kid? And what did you think of that?
Oh man, I loved it. It was like a treat because we rarely got to see any of the Disney stuff anyway, because we weren't at home on Sunday nights to watch the Disney Hour or whatever, and so to get to see that in a theater I saw Cinderella and Snow White and Bambi, all of them. I think all the classics. Yeah.
So my dad used to work at the movie theater in his hometown, and he got to watch like a ton of these for free. And I remember a couple of times we'd actually go back to his hometown just visiting, and sometimes we'd stop in the movie theater and he would like take us up to the booth, and he'd just be talking to the guy, and we would just be watching the movie, through the little hole, whatever that the projector shines through. And so I did get to see some of these kind of, not quite in, as the way you're supposed to see it, but I also enjoyed it. I thought it was cool because same thing, we didn't really have a whole lot of the Disney films ourselves. And, in fact, we had a Betamax. So, I mean, it was a little bit harder to get some of those anyway than it was VHS. And so, I mean, I always just dug it, I thought it was something neat, something different. But again, it's also a really good move by Disney, just kind of throwing whatever they can in here and hoping that it sticks. And I think it did, of course. Now Disney rules everything. So
you got to remember where Disney was in '84 too, man. Like anything to just get somebody to pay attention to us at this point.
Yeah.
Like, we'll take Spielberg. Heck yeah. You can have whatever you want, and that's how they really started to resurge, as they started wisely investing the capital they would get off of these things and turning it into something else. But that's a whole other paper to talk about. But yeah.
And it's funny because I'm watching the Gremlins as the movie starts playing. And Jerry, you have a 2-year-old. I have a 2-year-old. You've got other kids. I don't. But the Gremlin response was like watching my toddler respond to the actual scene in Snow White.
I hope. Yeah,
she
straight up.
She would be running around, doing her thing, screaming and yelling, be bopping, shoving snacks in her mouth. And then the movie would start. It would just be like, boom, saucer eyes. And then she starts singing along with the Seven Dwarves. And I just thought that was really funny because what is a toddler but a gremlin that made of human
totally
meat?
A gremlin. Having had 3 of them now, I can definitely say toddler equals gremlin. Yeah, for sure. You're right. It's exactly, and my 2-year-old still, we were watching Space Jam earlier tonight because they want to see the new one. I was like, no, you got to watch Michael Jordan first.
Yeah.
So we were watching that, and same thing. She was just kind of not paying attention, and then all of a sudden, something exciting happens, and she's right there, and then she starts doing exactly what Lola Bunny or whoever was on screen was doing. And so, I mean, their attention span is so short that I feel like she could party with these gremlins like forever and be totally cool. Like I don't think they'd hurt her. I think they'd literally just be like, hey, let's go hang out. Let's go grab a beer or something.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the things that struck me the most about having watched this for like the first time since having a toddler. It's like, okay, I see how your brain is wired and I see how their brains are wired. It all makes a lot of sense. Just pure
chaos,
yeah. Like the Nathan Powell comic strip with the little aliens where there's the little young alien and it says, chaos is how I learn. Billy and Kate get to live out everyone's dream, and that is to blow up a movie theater. Now, Jerry, when you were exploring your dad's hometown movie theater, did you find any giant gas mains in the back?
I don't recall any giant gas mains, but no, I can't say I did. So I got to chalk it up to different times.
Guys,
plot armor.
We're missing it. This is an environmental film now. This is anti-fracking. That's what this is. Wow. This is what happens. They're going to light the whole thing on fire. See?
Mind blown.
Yeah. No, I mean, seriously, wasn't that not the trope of every 80s movie is, let me find the gas man and put a small flame in front of it and blow it all to hell. We've been doing that for years.
Didn't they also, blow up the movie theater in The Blob or try to?
They did that.
I think so.
They did it in a Final Destination movie. They've blown up a lot of movie theaters.
It's pretty funny because, I don't remember there being a lot of giant gas mains, but my thought was if you're going to do this, then why don't you just do the universal fire and find a big room full of old silver nitrate film and just light that on fire and it'll go up like a priceless movie history.
Or light those old curtains on the side that have never been dusted. That's instant,
They don't light anymore because of all the dust.
Yeah, there you go. They're their own fire retardant now.
Exactly.
Yeah. No,
asbestos.
But I think it's a problem though, is that we create this army of gremlins and then we have to find a way to dispatch them sort of all at once to make Stripe go on the hunt for water again. Right. And I'm like, well, what? I mean, you created them so you could wreck the town. I get it, but it is a little cheap that they get taken out so easily. I don't know.
I love that perfectly just predictable, convenient just plot device, Oh yeah, we're all right here. Okay, let's blow them up. Oh wait, one of them isn't. Aha!
Because he went to get extra snacks. That's why Stripe isn't there. We should say he's like, I need some more jujubes, guys. I'll be back in a little bit. And it's everything smells like. You guys smell gas? I smell gas, and he gets out of town.
Stripe does sneak across the street to the Montgomery Ward and another piece of product placement to get candy. Is this Joe Dante quietly supporting people who sneak snacks from outside into the movie theater?
He's subverting the whole industry. Yeah.
Let's blow up the theater and sneak snacks in.
Right?
Scathing indictment on the whole cinema.
Only to be topped by the fact that this movie is only streaming on HBO Max exclusively. So there we go.
And yes, listen, Joe Dante also did Matinee, right?
Yeah.
Which is the most love letter
John Goodman?
Yeah, to the movie theater experience. But.
Yeah, totally is. So, I don't know. I think it's just a joke. You have to get him out, right? You got to get the main bad guy out. Gary Busey can't get shot by Riggs that early. And you got to have the fight on the lawn. It's the same thing. It just gets repeated over and over and over again. And that script was running around Hollywood at this time, so they may have ripped it off. We don't know. So Shane Black stuff's been around a while. Maybe Shane Black wrote the ending of this. You can't tell me he didn't, because it kind of goes down like a Shane Black movie. There's predators stalking. We're shooting people with all kinds of hardware. The Stripe is a little murderer. And Billy takes a beating. I will say, Zach Galligan, it's good that he's, tall, because he's going to need some of that height to recover.
Okay, I do have a question. So he's trying to hold off Stripe. Stripe's got the chainsaw. He's trying to hold him off with the bat. What was his plan? He did nothing else to try to get him off of dude, eventually it's going to go through that bat and you're going to die. What? Do something. Kick him off. I don't know, whatever.
Or realize you've got 4 feet on it. Maybe we should just move and then squash it. I don't know. That's the funny thing about these. Look, it's the conceit of all the dang Chucky movies too, is how the hell can that happen that way? Because it can.
Yeah, that's pedantic even for me, and I've been being pedantic about the Gremlin rules this whole time. It's called, Jay, don't kick this puppet. It's worth more than you are, Zach Galligan.
Yes, that is
$1 million here.
If you kick the string puppet, we will fire you. So we can find somebody else to googly eye this brunette. So we'll reshoot it.
We can replace you with a Dylan brother, or we can just die. We can just put Judge Reinhold in a wig and not tell anybody.
I will call Rob
Eric
Lowe.
Stoltz.
Steven Spielberg at that moment. I will call him up right now.
You heard a little guy called Michael J. Fox? We can get it.
I mean, we can only get him on the weekends because Family Ties is a slave shop, but whatever. We'll get him when we can. I'll take Stoltz, whatever.
Stoltz, yeah.
We'll do it all. But no, we get the big showdown, and I mean, it is a big action scene, and I do get a good wink out of the Gizmo driving the Barbie Corvette thing. You know, even though like that's completely impossible, but whatever. Like that's funny because it's replaying the Clark Gable lines. Stuff like I dug that. It's sort of a Clark Gable mark, and I like that movie. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of cute. I thought that was cool.
This scene, this climax at the end, was the coolest part of all those Gremlin record books.
I agree
because it was done so well on the record.
And yeah, they really did a good job with those.
They knocked those out of the park, and I'm afraid to go back and listen to them because what if they suck now? But
well, that's the danger with everything. Yeah,
I know. And I should say that movie. I know that name of the movie is To Please a Lady. It's the Gable movie that you're seeing referenced out there in the race car and the romantic thing. But it's got that same. Again, it's 1950. It's that same sheen on top of it. The hero is going to come into the day. But Gizmo like launches himself off of like a snow shovel and just lands in the corner conveniently by the window. I don't think he knew that's what that was, and I don't think he knew how it worked. Like, how did Gizmo realize like, oh, I need to pull this string because that'll cause problems?
No, he puts it together because he tracks up the string to the shade and says bright light, and then he pulls it.
Oh, I missed that. Okay, so that's a good point then. So I missed that point.
Remember when department stores sold guns?
Oh, yeah, guns. What? Right?
Yeah. That totally brought me back, cause I remember all that. It's so weird to think about now, but yeah, that was like a normal thing. I mean, even Walmart, remember?
Sears and Roebuck had shotguns in a catalog that you could just order and it would be mailed to you or shipped to your local store.
And I remember a lot of those used to be like that whole hunting area used to be right by the toy section too.
Right? Yeah. Let's not even talk about it. In the 80s, there was a hunting toy section, as it were.
That was quite a blast from the past, but why is it that Stripe is the only one who bothers to get a gun? Why does Billy not get a gun?
I was wondering the same. I'm like, Billy disarms him from a lot of things. Billy could have gone full Ash and was really armed up if he had wanted to. But let's remember, Billy is stupid. And so therefore, all he's thinking about is getting out of the Montgomery Ward somehow. But his dad shows up and like Hoyt Axton's like, am I in the scene? Okay, what am I supposed to do? And, and look horrified at that goo on the ground. Okay. It's funny, but I will say though, like you do a full on horror movie, like those effects with
that melting scene. Yeah. I remember that. Like I was scarred from that. That totally got me. And I think that got me worse than the actual face melting scene of Raiders. And I don't know if it's just because it was already a creature or because you see the kind of skeletal bubbly goo afterwards. I don't know what it was, but for some reason it was like just a lot more terrifying than the whole Ark of the Covenant bit.
I mean, I think that there's two things. There's one, he's a creature, and you've already seen him kind of bubbling anyway because he's doing the multiplication thing, and you're like, oh, that's gross. And the Nazis deserved it. I mean, so come on.
That's true.
That's the truth.
Yeah, Stripe did nothing wrong. We all know this.
Well, I don't know about that, but I wouldn't go that far wrong.
But Billy is the least, all Billy does in this whole time is get, attacked and shot at, get beaten up by a little 2.5 foot tall green monster. And the person who's
protagonist ever.
And the person who saves the day is even smaller than Stripe. It's Gizmo. Because Hoyt Axton doesn't do anything. Barney the dog just kind of barks and almost gets run over by the Barbie car. And Gizmo's the only one who's like, oh, right. I guess it's up to me to stop this thing I didn't do, Corey Feldman.
Gizmo has realized these morons have caused all of this. So Barney, get out of the way. I got this. Gizmo watched him some Clark Gable movies. He got a little machismo and he's ready to go.
I think if I remember from the novelization, they provide a little backstory on this. Where I guess the Mogwai were actually creatures that were created by some aliens. And I guess 1 out of every 10,000 or something actually wouldn't turn into a gremlin if you got wet. But somehow, I guess, Gizmo, it's so weird. Of course, novelizations always add like a whole bunch more. But sometimes I actually wonder because very, few times novelizations actually add stuff from like the, like a previous draft of the script. And so I always kind of wonder, like, what was in, like, was that ever in the actual script or was that just the brainchild of
all I know is somebody at Fox got that and held on to it all the way until we had Alien versus Predator. That lasted a long time, man.
Oh, now I so want Alien versus Predator versus Gremlins.
Oh, that's good. But in the original draft, Gizmo turns into the lead bad gremlin.
He's supposed to be striped, right?
There is no
right.
stripe.
He is striped. Yeah.
Can I tell you, like, I almost like that better, though, that there's real consequences right there. Now, that's a different movie, and it would be a much darker movie, but I kind of like that, and I almost wish they had done that, because then Billy would have to kill his pet.
Put him down like Old Yeller. Oh,
yeah,
man.
right? Yeah, you have to kill your favorite thing, to be able to survive this. That would have been a way to go. But I think like Spielberg or whoever said like, "Nah, man, we're going to sell like 1 billion of those stupid things, so you can't do that."
Yeah, that was 100% a Spielberg idea. He was definitely, and he's admitted as much, I believe, that it was his idea to make sure that Gizmo stays throughout the whole movie and that Gizmo has an active role throughout the movie.
And it was a smart idea. I mean, for real, look how much the movie made, and look how much all the merchandising made. I mean, who didn't want a Gizmo? I mean, he was, like we talked about earlier, he was just so ridiculously adorable. So that's like completely a win there for them. But I kind of wish I had a piece of that action because, I mean,
right?
That's like a lot of money there.
I mean, not only that, you're talking about 37 years of intellectual property where everything after it is compared to it.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah, just imagine if Joe Dante owned the marketing rights to this. He would be as rich as George Lucas right now.
Yes, he would, but he didn't sign the line, Ron. That's a bad George Lucas. Cut that.
No, we're going to keep that bad George Lucas.
Is that who that was supposed to be?
Yeah, I wasn't even sure who that was. I was like, did Paul Bearer advise Joe Dante about this thing? Oh, yes. Keep Gizmo around.
Oh, man. I got to have you on my show just for getting me with a spoon.
I'm dead. That's awesome. No, well, maybe it was before George began the merchandising, but George did teach Steven about that, so that's where he got it from. Well, I'm sorry, is that a Darth Vader mask you have there? My science project? We'll be writing a check for that, please.
That's better. Your Lucas is improving.
That was a better one, yeah. I agree.
But okay, so before we get to the ending of this movie, Jerry, you're a music guy. Jay, you are a music guy. The two of you need to talk about this Jerry Goldsmith score. Specifically, you need to talk about the Gremlins theme that everyone knows about this movie.
The Gremlins rag. Mm-hmm. So it was written as a ragtime kind of, with ragtime kind of feel. And so we actually have stride piano being played on one hand. I mean, it's not quite a minor blues, but it's basically just like an AABA kind of structure, which is really simple, but so it's really catchy, and it's got the syncopated rhythms, bum, 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 bum. And so it really kind of propels that feel, and it's just silly. And I think, the use of synthesizer, because this was like during that time when Jerry Goldsmith, who I love Jerry Goldsmith, we were talking about him earlier, and a lot of times he just kind of phones it in, but when he's like really on, his stuff is amazing. I think Planet of the Apes, I think Alien, I mean, there's just Poltergeist, I think is one of my favorite scores of his as well. But in this one, by making it like that ragtime kind of feel, again, it makes it timeless. We're talking about, spanning all these different decades and different eras, but at the same time, it emphasizes like the silliness of these creatures. And then just adding the synthesizer to get some of these weird sound effects. And then, of course, we get like typical Jerry Goldsmith, action cues with like ostinatos and like low brass and, glockenspiel runs and things like that. But I love that theme. It's just, it's really just like a minor one, and then it goes to like a minor 4, and like just hits the dominant 5 like for a little bit. I mean, it's just nice and simple.
Yeah, no, it totally works, and it gives you that, again, that offbeat piece of it makes it weird. And what I always call it is like it's evil carnival music. Yeah, and that's what that song, the rag is, and it's what a lot of the music in this is. It's the wacky carnival gone awry music, and I'm here for that. I also will now blame him for everything Danny Elfman's ever done, because I feel like that is a lot of what is happening in Danny Elfman's life is evil carnival.
Evil carnival, yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
Pee-wee's Big Adventure,
and I mean, and I reviewed one of those weird Elfman movies once, back in the day, and the music's the same. It's just this off. There's just something a little off about it, like you can't dance to it, but you kind of want to, but you can't. But yeah, I imagine some of those early Disney cartoons did this. If you've ever watched them, they're black and white, and like everybody has stubble, and they look homeless and scary. And there's always like evil music going behind them, like dun da dun da dun. It's just it's funky, and I love it. Man, Goldsmith, like say, when he's on, and he creates stuff that only when you hear it, you know exactly what movie that is. Yeah. Scene is, and that's the best compliment I can pay to any score.
Which I think is kind of missing from like a lot of movies nowadays. There's like not really very, very memorable themes. And one thing that like John Williams, Danny Elfman, Jerry Goldsmith, all these guys did really well. And this is a perfect example of it. This Gremlins rag here. And even Gizmo's theme later on, which is also kind of like does double duty as kind of like a love theme, I suppose. But I mean, it's just, they're very memorable. You hear a Gizmo, do, 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 that kind of thing, and Jerry Goldsmith's really, how should I say this? He really doesn't use a lot of like diegetic kind of music, like music itself that is, is actually a part of the scene and is part of the reality of the film. Most of it is just score that accompanies, whatever's happening. But in this case, I mean, he actually did. That's Gizmo hums that theme. That's like his song that he kind of sings or whatever. And I think he really uses it very well. And then, of course, we hear it, a nice, lush, full orchestra with strings and everything. But the one thing that always stands out to me is just a lot of the synths in this one. There's just so much synthesizer that, and I get it. I mean, you have a new toy to play with, and he was always known for like using all sorts of random and novel instruments. So like in Planet of the Apes, he used like mixing bowls turned upside down. He also used like the Brazilian cuica and a Jewish shofar, that kind of thing to get those primal sounds. And Alien, he used like the didgeridoo and a conch shell and a serpent. It's like a medieval instrument that he used. But here, I mean, it's just, we have a new toy. It's a synthesizer that he'd been playing with for like a few years, but you get all these different cool sounds to kind of blend with the rest of the orchestra. And so you can really tell that, okay, this is, I get it. It's your new toy. You're playing with it. But, I mean, I would have liked to have seen a little more creativity in it. Although I got to applaud him just because that theme is just so memorable.
Yeah, I think we should tell people too, like the synthesizers he's using are the kind that like you have to literally tune them to get what you want out of them. You don't just dial it up and play. You have to mess with it on the diodes and all that stuff. And it was stuff that like, cool. Yeah, the like Pink Floyd and, really Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys were the ones that really pioneered a lot of that stuff. And it had made its way into movie soundtrack at that point, and because it got cheaper to make them. It used to be a good synthesizer with half a room, and then you got where it was just a big box and you could do things with it. So you play with a lot. It does make this very much part of its time, but in the same, again, like you could lay some of the score on any modern movie and it would work for the most part. Maybe not the rag, but like, just the orchestral pieces.
The action cues,
Yeah, sure. They would lay right in any Marvel flick that's out there right now.
Now I really want the Gremlins rag overlaid onto Loki.
Right? Like, I think that would actually work, too. That's a good call.
Especially with the alligator Loki. Spoilers for Loki, sorry.
Yeah. If you hadn't watched Loki by this point, by the time this show's out, y'all, come on. That's true. Get on the train. Join the movement.
So, do we think Jerry Goldsmith was just like, hey, look at what I got at Gary Newman's garage sale? he brought in like a crate full of synthesizer.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I can see that. Yep.
Yeah. Totally. I think it's fun though. These composers, particularly ones like Goldsmith and Horner, some of these guys that have been around for decades, to watch them adapt to the new things of the decades as they come through. It's what makes it, again, what makes their work memorable and their stuff memorable is that they pick up whatever the new thing is.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what really drew me to Goldsmith was I'm like a huge like 20th century orchestral fan. So like, you know, there's like romanticism, classicism, you know, all that stuff, Baroque. But to me, I really like stuff like Stravinsky and Bartok and like all those guys, Berg and Schoenberg and, you know, all those guys. And I think he does a great job of like combining like the atonal qualities of Berg with like the just primitivism of like Stravinsky, and he just combines them together in such a way that it really works, you know. And I was talking about Planet of the Apes, so you think about like that hunt cue when Heston's, you know, trying to escape from the apes and he's captured for the first time, and we get that on piano, you know, bum 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 bum, and he just has that ostinato going underneath. Well, we get kind of a similar thing with like all these action cues where when you know, Mrs. Deagle, you know, in that scene, and when the Gremlins are just running amok, and so I love how he combines that, but at the same time he overlays it with the melody that is just so memorable. Because of that, I think that's why it works in the context that it does. I remember there's an old story about Stravinsky wanting to get into film music because, I mean, at that point, orchestral music was already kind of dying out. And so he met with like the head of a studio, I think it was MGM. And, you know, he's like, the guy was like, I hear you're the best composer in the world. He's like, yeah, I guess so. He's like, okay, well, you know, we have a new movie coming out. How long will it take you to, you know, to write some music for it? He said a year. He's like, all right, bye, Mr. Stravinsky. You know, so I think of that, but then I think of like Jerry Goldsmith being able to do that in like just, you know, 8 weeks or whatever it is that it took at that time. I know it's gotten shorter and shorter nowadays, but I mean, to me, that's just amazing. And I mean, I got to compliment him because even though he used the synth, that rag is just, it works.
That leads us to the end of the movie where Key Luke returns to get his Mogwai back. I don't know how he knew things had gone awry. I don't know if he just left Chinatown, like, was only just getting there because he took the slow bus when he found out his grandson sold the Mogwai to the whitest man who's ever lived.
No, dude, he's on foot. He walks. He walked across the earth to go get that thing.
Oh, he's not Kane from Kung Fu. He didn't walk across the earth.
I mean, no, he walks out of town. He's not walking toward the bus station. He's walking on the road toward the moon. So
maybe that's what took
from
so long,
Chinatown. So like wherever the heck Kingston Falls is supposed to be, like if it's supposed to be like upstate New York or whatever, that'd take you a little while to get there. So.
Is it upstate New York? I thought it was Ohio for some reason.
I don't know. I mean, it is.
No idea.
It could be. I mean, you know, again, it's Hill Valley, so it's not California.
It was just Midwest, somewhere Midwest. Yeah,
but maybe it is. Maybe it is Ohio. So, but still, that's a good hoof. You know, you go from Chinatown, you got to go to Pennsylvania, a lot of hills, problems.
Yeah, especially when you're a 100-year-old man? Question mark. He's clearly
right?
old.
Yeah. But he's in great shape, you know, right? But I'd love it. He comes back and like, not only does he get it back and gives his money back, but he has to lecture everybody in the house too. As if like they don't realize the stakes of what has happened. The whole town's dead except us. We're all that's left.
Yeah, I know you sliced your arm open and your house is demolished and a lot of people lost their lives, but come on, you guys weren't ready for this. How dare you try?
But only the gall to turn around to Billy and give him that false hope, like, maybe one day you will be prepared. I'm like, what was Billy going to do? The challenge of the warrior to get the Mogwai? Like, I'm sure the look on Billy's face is like, no, it's all right. Like, I'll say goodbye and it's okay. Did you see the brunette? Like, I'm just going to hang out with her because she doesn't turn into an evil monster when I get her in the shower or anything.
I totally want to see like
I've seen this chick come out of a pool. She does not go evil.
No,
when she is wet. So.
No bubbling going on there. But I totally want to see like Billy's training montage now as he becomes worthy and learns how to deal with the Mogwai.
We'll set it to a Survivor like Rocky IV.
There you go, right? Yeah. It's gotta be and then top it off with Hearts on Fire. Just let's lay that on top of it.
And then when he finally gets the pet, you gotta put you're the best.
Yes. That would be perfect.
You're the best. Oh, yeah.
There we go. Yes. Let's do all of that.
Yeah. You know, it's really funny to me that Key Luke gives this lecture about, you know, you people of already destroying nature or whatever. which is rich coming from a guy from a culture where they built the Three Gorges Dam that displaced like over 1 million people and has killed at least 30 endangered species that we know of. I guess since he speaks Cantonese, he's from Hong Kong, not from like mainland China. So maybe he's just as much a victim of the Chinese government as everyone else is in that situation. Not to get political or anything.
I think we can give him a pass on most of that. But like I said, the thing about it is I just find it funny that he feels the need to lecture them when the damage is there. Like,
yeah,
we know.
It seems like that whole situation is like the lecture, don't you think?
It should be more only accented by the fact that Hoyt Action is just desperately trying to apologize to me. And it is a good bit of comedy. He was like, I want you to have one of these smokeless ashtrays or whatever he's trying to give him. And I don't know. It's just funny. No, a man already tried to give me one or whatever, the gas station guy that he gave one to earlier or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I just thought it was a good bit of comedy on top of, yes, we know. Like, we are not only am I not ready, I don't want to be ready for this thing. Let me say bye to it and you take it back and don't, whatever this is, please destroy it because there can't be more of them.
I mean, really, it's Mr. Wing's fault for selling a Mogwai to Hoyt Axton.
It's his grandson's fault.
It's his grandson's fault. Yeah, he didn't want to do it.
That we know.
Turn him down.
That's who we're blaming, but we don't know that.
No, look, that is a complete commentary on how youth, even youth from other cultures are corrupted by American capitalism, Ron. You can't lose sight of the geopolitical statement of this movie.
That kid was 100% born in America. We all know that.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
That's why he was like, priceless animal, rare, endangered, dangerous creature. Yeah, $200 sounds about right.
We need the money. Come on.
Look, he knows, like, we got to get the light bill on. Okay, yeah. Like, the New York Power Department is not a charity. I can assure you.
Yeah, we're hooked up to that Ghostbuster thing across the street. It's getting a little dicey.
Yeah, the EPA guy is still there. Like, I think there's going to be problems. I'm hearing words.
Walter Peck is breathing down my neck, guys. Come on.
Yeah,
got to do something.
It's another reason you know that Kingston Falls is not in New Jersey because nothing is glowing in the middle of the night. So it's obviously somewhere that's relatively clean.
Yeah, Kingston Falls takes place on 3 Mile Island itself.
That would have made the Gremlins somehow more terrifying. Or it would have made them a Roland Emmerich Godzilla, one or the other.
I was just thinking of the Chernobyl miniseries where all the miners, all the naked miners go underground, but it's just gremlins.
Hey, it's hot down here.
I am all in. I'll watch that.
Stripe earns the hero of the Soviet Union badge. Just kind of pin it to his neck.
Oh, if Stellan Skarsgård can just play Mr. Wing, we've got a sequel.
Okay. Well, after those wild digressions that went nowhere, it's time to get this ship back on track with our final thoughts, recommendations, and popcorn ratings for Gremlins. If you're not familiar with the popcorn ratings, we go from small to extra large. You can add any kind of qualifier to that you want, extra butter, burnt, full of kernels. But, however you want your popcorn, and however you feel popcorn describes this movie. And as our guest, you will get to go first. Jerry, what do you have to say about Gremlins?
So overall, this movie, I mean, it's just a joy to watch. I think it's just so much fun. It definitely gives you like all the Christmas feels. It's not one that I normally think of as a Christmas movie, but like Die Hard, I think there's just so much Christmas in it that, it's got to be, you can totally take it as a Christmas movie. It's just everything about it screams wacky, but also it does have that turn, but at the same time, it just makes you happy when you're watching it. It's just so much fun. So I think for me, I'd give this a big old large tub of popcorn. I might add a little bit of butter, but there are definitely a few kernels in there. It is a little too long, I think. You're right. That section does kind of drag, especially like in the third act there, or like just that transition right between the second and third acts, I think could probably have lost maybe just a little bit of time and it would have been perfect. But just because of that Phoebe Cates speech, because of the delivery, because it's just so unbelievable, really, I'm definitely giving it that big old tub of popcorn.
Jay, what say you?
So, again, as I watched this for this review and I realized how little I'd actually ever seen it, I can't deny the impact it had on pop culture because of all of the things that we've talked about through this review that it references, that it's a part of. And it certainly is something memorable, even though it borrows from so many other pieces. And this makes it kind of fun. It's definitely not perfect. And there's a lot of problems with this. And like I say, if you start picking at it the way we have, the threads are going to come out of the sweater pretty easy. But if you just sort of let it wash over you, it can go down okay. Again, I still think it drags a good bit in the second act. That's still a problem. But you know what? You can check your phone or whatever during that time. I mean, I don't recommend doom scrolling at any time, but check the weather, look at your Scott portfolio if you have one, something like that. Check your email. Make sure your boss hasn't sent you something at 11 o'clock at night whenever you're watching this. And then when you get to the third act, if you'll watch it as like, okay, this is now a horror action movie, you kind of can follow it and go with it. And it does have a pretty satisfying ending. And again, you can laugh at a lot of the goofy stuff in it, but it's so iconic. And the score's great. The acting in it's not very good, but there's some fun parts in it. I'm going to give it a medium popcorn, but let me follow through with the metaphor. This is the medium popcorn where back in the old days in the theater when they buttered it for you. And you feel like, oh yeah, that the person giving me that really did a good job. And you get through the top part and you're like, oh man, all the butter's gone. So now I'm just eating this kind of salty, sort of rubbery substance. And there's a burnt one. And then you get to the bottom and you realize the butter has settled there. And it's the good soaked in kind of popcorn butter. And that's what this movie is. So it's a medium popcorn with layered butter.
And I will give this a medium popcorn with extra butter. It has flaws, but there's a lot to recommend about it. Mostly, this is the kind of movie that, it's cliche to say this is the kind of movie they wouldn't make these days, because this wasn't the kind of movie they were really making back in 1984 either. This is a really strange novel movie that takes really big swings, and it doesn't always connect. Every so often something will land really hard, like the creature design, like the Jerry Goldsmith theme, like the action in the second half of the movie, like the crowd shot of all those gremlin puppets watching Snow White and bopping around and having a really good time. Just stuff like that just kind of clicks and hits and hangs really well. So I'm going to go medium popcorn, extra butter. Yeah, I can't say it any better than these two gentlemen have. But before we go, Jerry, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and give us some plugs?
So, I'm the host of Totally Rad Christmas. I've been doing this for close to 2 years now. I had my big Christmas in July episode, which was just a big clip show. I did an awards show just as an excuse to do like a big clip show, essentially, of all my favorite my favorite episodes. It was so much fun. I try to talk all things Christmas in the 80s. So it's not just movies. It's not just specials. We talk books. We talk magazines. We talk comics. We talk toys like Mask and He-Man, Transformers and G.I. Joe. We talk, things that barely have to do with Christmas, but hey, like if you got it for Christmas, that kind of counts as well. I give a huge leeway. I talk fun stuff like, Night of the Comet. Ron, I had the pleasure of you coming on the show, and we talked Invasion USA, the canon film with Chuck Norris. I try to keep it fun, and just my main goal is just to remind you of that time you were growing up when it was kind of just magical and weird and wacky because it was the 80s and everything was neon, but also like they had the best stuff, like, toys and cartoons wise. So, I try to do that every episode, and I have guests from other Christmas podcasts. I have guests from just other random podcasts on. It's just so much fun. And it's just one of those things that I love doing, and I can't wait to do more. So I got to get you guys on again. Jay, I'd love to have you on for sure. It's been a blast. And you can find us anywhere you get podcasts, of course. And on social media, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Totally Rad Christmas and on Twitter at Rad Christmas. I do have a website, but I still haven't done anything with it yet. So, don't go there. But, but it is totallyradchristmas.com.
One day that will be something useful.
It eventually, yeah.
And as always, you can find the stuff that I write at denofgeek.com. I will have covered American Horror Story. I will have covered The Walking Dead. I will have covered all sorts of things that aren't necessarily Christmas related, but might fall into the horror sort of area. And not to mention other random stuff that just pops up here and there. And as always, you can follow the show's social media at FilmstripPod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. There you'll find announcements about upcoming shows, links to shows that are currently out, and a link to our Letterboxd page, which contains our entire archive of reviews. So feel free to go to filmstrippodcast.com to check out our Anchor FM page. Or you can just find us on your podcast platform of choice, Apple, Spotify, Google, etc. You can find this pod wherever fine pods are casted. Please like, rate, and review. Give us a positive rating. Give us 5 stars. Share the show with people you like. Share the show with your enemies. Share it with everyone and to everyone. Jerry, as always, thank you very much for popping on the show. It was great to have you. It was a totally rad experience.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, that's the kind of humor you get on this.
but for real, though, thanks for having me. It was a ton of fun.
Yeah, we will definitely have to have you on again for a movie we've talked about doing for quite some time with Jerry. But I won't mention it yet. Save that for later. But for Jay and Jerry, I'm Ron. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, etc., etc. And thank you very much for listening to Filmstrip.
Thank you for listening to Filmstrip. You can find more episodes on our website, filmstrippodcast.com. The Filmstrip theme music is produced and performed by Frozen Lake 121. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504, C2, Title 17.